So you have to be a problem solver, and you have to present some innovative solutions. And during that process, you're building your credibility. So at the end of the day, people are confident that you can perform the job the way they want to perform.
I am excited because Mark's still excited by it, which is a good sign, because there are still people who are in our industry who still think it's a good industry to be in, that there's still lots of opportunities.
All right, here we go with the next installment. So this one's going to be a little bit of a flashback. And the only person we're missing on this episode is one of the members' siblings, which would have made this fun. But you guys go way back, way back. Probably back to Graham days and back to days when Mark was a window guy, and unfortunately, Eliot still is a window guy, and I'm trying to not be a window guy. So let's.
Once you get in the window business, Adrian, you don't get out. You
can't
get out. One of those things.
So I don't know. Let's start with maybe one of your earliest recollections of when you two came across, and did you guys start out on a friendly note?
Yeah,
sure. I mean, we were both working for Graham at the time, and Eliot was designing a window wall for Graham, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything about window wall back then, so on the sales side.
Yeah, I think we had just done that 6700 SR, which I don't know if it's even called that anymore. That low profile window for Starrett Lehigh building in New York City.
Right. Yeah, that kind of morphed from there. That whole product line.
Yeah, I know. I lost track of it after the initial working on it with Jim Hicks, who's one of the best designers left in our business on the Windows side. Genius guy.
Well, forget the name of it. It's a super recognizable window wherever you go. I mean, I see it and I know it right away. And I think the little bit of the engineering behind it has me curious how it's fully executed, but it's an incredibly impressive product for people that care about historic replication. But maybe that's a better question. Why were you focusing on window wall, and what was the move there? And it might be interesting as well to comment on, we're all Northeast people here, and so window wall is everywhere in New York, but you go to other markets and people don't even know what window wall is.
You still see it in other markets, I believe, right, Mark?
Yeah, you'll see it. You see it a lot in the Southeast, but with new construction declining, a lot of that window wall work has gone away. When Graham was looking at window wall, it was basically, hey, what can we do to get in the new construction market?
Right.
Because we were always based in retrofit and in historical replication.
But let me ask this: why window wall and not curtain wall? What is the big kind of fear that window people have around curtain wall?
Curtain wall is a whole different animal, and you have to be geared up to do that and have the engineering chops to do it. Whereas window wall is really a window. It goes from floor to floor inset. You're not hanging anything on the outside of the building, which is, a huge deal, right, Eliot?
Yeah. I mean, it's different people, different skill sets, different comfort levels. I think window wall, because it's installed in between the slabs, they're not really hanging the panels on the outside of the building. So window guys are more comfortable with that. There's no fire safing involved usually with window wall, so that's one other aspect of it people like. And it was perceived as being a less expensive product, and I think that's really what it always was, is that it's really thought of as being a less expensive product.
Still today?
I don't know. From what I can see, the market's like upside down price wise today. I mean, there's stuff coming in from overseas. At least the first one people take is real cheap, and then they get a taste of what it takes to actually do one here, and then their price goes up a lot on the second and third one.
So kind of on this call, we have, people who have seen the market. Mark has seen many, many different markets. Eliot sees a lot of what goes on here, and I kind of have this conversation a lot. It's like, now that we've opened up Pandora's box with price being a race to the bottom, and then any and every manufacturer or supplier getting a chance from overseas, Do you think, I don't know, and we'll veer off into more opaque stuff and fully unitized systems with Mark afterwards, but do you think it's the type of thing where it's like we never go back from here? And like how do you think the glazing world is being viewed today, and what would you compare it to in terms of people just looking at it as, it's just a commodity item and just buy it from anybody?
Well, when you get curtain wall and window wall end of it, there's so much engineering involved that it's just not a matter of putting a window in a hole. And even when you're doing punched windows, there's so many codes that have to be met, and especially with ADA, uh, all kinds of structural codes, water penetration codes.
Let me ask you
So
guys this: what's the difference between window wall and a punched window with receptors?
I think from a wind load, Elliot, you could probably answer this a little bit better, but I would think from a wind load standpoint, you're gonna be taking on a lot more stress in a punched opening.
Uh, no, I mean, the wind load on the building is the same, whether it's on a 5x5 window or it's on a 5x10 window wall. Generally, for us, window wall is always a window product that's installed from the underside of the slab above to the top of the slab below. So slab to slab install generally uses a receptor system, although the Canadians with their bypassed window wall don't always use a receptor system, but in this country, in the United States, we tend to always use a sill starter or a sill receptor, which is referred to sometimes as a tank. So originally used to collect water that would leak from the male to female mullions, because most window walls are male female at the vertical joinery. So where one window frame joins another one, the optimal way to do it is with a male female side stack or jam, and then a head receptor to accommodate the flexion of the slab above and to make the installation go easier and faster. Punched windows can also be very tall, and we see that happening now more often too. We see people just doing a knee wall and maybe a little soffit above so that the window installers can screw into steel stud instead of into concrete. Um, Seems like an awful lot of work to me to avoid drilling into concrete and maybe monitoring a no rebar zone at the edge of the slab. But uh, that's how I've always heard window wall defined. Now, how they perform, um, you know, it's still basically a window system. So it performs like a window system. Each piece of glass is going to be drained individually. The sill receptor system is there to catch water for the most part that uh, leaks through bad seals at joinery where one frame is joined to the other. But it drains conventionally like a window, and then into a sill receptor or a sill starter. And it, has limitations because you don't really see too many window systems that are deeper than 4 to 5 inches. That's a pretty deep window system. And because people are always looking for smaller profiles at the jams and the mullions, generally they're not stout enough to resist higher wind loads when you start getting over 4 feet by maybe 10 feet. So you start to have to reinforce with either a separate mullion or steel, or something else.
A lot of people who I would call veterans in the industry that have more experience than I do, have a little bit of a skeptical or pessimistic view at the moment on the industry. I think I'm old enough to have seen a lot, but young enough to kind of try to remain malleable and adapt based on what's happening. But it seems like the two of you who have been around for longer than I still, for some reason, have stayed in this industry and still seem rather motivated by what you're doing. So before I get into Eliot, who's been on a ton of times, uh, how do you view, like, what's exciting for you at the moment, Mark? And I guess, if you look at yourself 5-10 years ago, do you look at things differently than you do now?
Well, there's always a search for the right project. I mean, that's the key to, the success in this business, is to find the people that want quality, that are willing to invest the time for design and to go after the right projects. So I spend a lot of time qualifying projects prior to moving into the prefabrication end of things. But again, we qualify projects. in my mind, it's really exciting to take a look at a set of plans in 2D and all of a sudden ride by this building 2 years, 3 years later and say, wow, I had a part in that. And you can point to something that, you had a part in. You kind of facilitated the design with the architect, with the engineer, with the testing people, with the consultants, and you kind of steered the project. You're like an orchestra leader, if you will. You bring in the right music when that music is needed. So I'm still really bullish on the market. It's just a matter of finding the right projects and developing the right relationships.
Bullish on the market in what sense? That we just have ongoing construction activity?
There's ongoing construction activity, and it's an industry that excites me. So I tend to be a very optimistic person. So I'm always looking at the bright side.
I was waiting for Eliot to smirk because he on the last episode he didn't, and I knew what he was thinking on the inside. So let's have you respond to that, Eliot, and what excites you. But you got to be on mute to unmute to answer that.
I wish I knew where that button was for him.
I am excited because Mark's still excited by it, which is a good sign because there are still people who are in our industry who still think it's a good industry to be in, that there's still lots of opportunities. I know people get, burnt out because markets change. Our industry's changed so many times I can't even keep track, right? Players have come and gone. Type of product we've been installing has changed dramatically. And even today, Mark's working for a company that makes prefabricated wall panels. And modular and prefabrication is all you hear about today. And I think that's a good thing because we can do a lot more off-site to make sure that quality is there and we can control the quality and we can design efficiency into the buildings that way. And I think it's great. Windows are a part of it. Obviously, we're putting windows into those wall panels, but I'm sure you guys put other things into the wall panels besides windows. And I'm excited by the fact that there are still people who are looking to be innovative and chase that next perfect job.
Well, let me ask you, all right, so let's talk about this. Prefabrication is gaining steam, embodied carbon, reducing the construction schedule, mitigating risk on site to not have multiple trades or a massive labor force on the construction site. So all these things are now getting traction and people talk about it. But, Eliot still sees a lot behind the scenes of what actually is happening in the market and how backwards maybe it is from the message that's being spread. So, let's play in a world where you get more prefabrication, more unitization. That's all well and good, but you're just going to, okay, so the market's unitized, kind of like New York, you don't see high rise. It doesn't necessarily mean the construction methodology is steering in the direction that we need it to go. And so how do you see, Mark, kind of the globalization of either overseas product, overseas workforce impacting domestic companies here in the US that are trying to either stay alive, stay afloat, or grow?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm glad you gave that to me. So I think it forces US companies to be more innovative and to try to, and again, to find the right projects to go after. And I think, I've always worked for companies and built my reputation on the architectural and design communities. They're on the leading edge. So if you can satisfy the demands of the architectural and design communities, you're always going to be leading the innovation. As far as products that come in from overseas, I mean, I know sometimes those products or those components can be incorporated into a system that's assembled in the US. Because when you look at Windows, it's basically, they're assemblers. There are very few that are doing everything from soup to nuts. And, at Eastern on the prefabrication side, we'll incorporate anything into a wall system as long as it meets the specification and the design, whether it's a corrugated panel, whether it's terracotta, whether it's windows, whether it's curtain wall, whether it's louvers.
That's what I was going to say, because if you can keep up with the consulting and architectural community, Eliot, you're going to have to unmute yourself for this one. If you can keep up with the design community, and either meet the performance requirements, help them model it, help them design, build the building, which we've seen some of these overseas contractors have incredible technical and engineering resources. Why should they stray elsewhere? And so you say find the right project, but it's not that an overseas supplier can't fulfill it. Maybe there's some kind of all-American requirement. Maybe there is limitations, like you said, from a panelized systems in terms of what can be shipped from overseas. But that's kind of interesting that maybe all of the sort of soft cost items can be utilized from overseas, but a lot of kind of, whether it's assembly or labor force or kind of the factory infrastructure, is what we can take advantage of here domestically.
Well, the other part is you really have to understand the U.S. market. But the go-to-market strategy is, it's more of a systems approach. When I was actually, a glass and glazing contractor, we had people coming to us and want to sell us extrusions to build windows, and boy, that's the last thing you want to do is build the window unless you have a factory and all the testing behind it. So it's understanding the market is a huge deal. It's just not a matter of, the lowest price. It's like, who are you going to go to get your product specified? Who's going to be the best one to put it in? Who's going to stand behind their work? That type of thing.
So getting back to the soft parts and components and fabricators, when's the last time either one of you bought a keyboard or mouse that wasn't made overseas?
True.
Ever? But they all say Logitech or Hewlett Packard on them or something like that, because I can actually remember buying keyboards and mice that were made in the United States, but it was 35 years ago. And I think I was on an Olivetti 286 computer. So that's how long ago it was. But we evolve, and we're evolving. And you're right, there will be a lot more maybe systems that are being fabricated partially overseas, maybe glazed here, which I think we're still figuring out what makes sense. I think, how the market evolves is going to be interesting in the next few years. I think the European model, although a lot of European system companies have come here, for whatever reason, they really haven't given the European model a very good chance here, as far as I could see. I think they came here and get enticed by huge jobs, whether it's a high rise or just a big building, and decide to go after that instead of doing the legwork and setting up fabricators and training and getting specified. It's a long haul to do all those things. And they're spoiled because those things were done 30 and 40 years ago, and they don't have to redo it again now. But when you break into a new market that doesn't have the same paradigm as Europe, Africa, most of Asia, which is where there's a system designer, they work with the architects, they get specified on a project, and then fabricators will bid the job and supply the project. And the fabricators are local. System designer may be a German company, but the fabricator may be in UAE and the project may be in Egypt, or it could be a fabricator in Taiwan or Singapore and the project is in Zimbabwe or wherever. It's all a matter of how the paradigms are. And I think eventually our paradigm, which this is not that strange to us as people think, Cornier, Vistawall, US Aluminum, they've all been system designers for decades and decades. They just didn't sell windows. They sold storefront systems, doors, and curtain wall and other things. But Mark, you mentioned fabricators. There are some. Every market's got 2 or 3 big guys who fabricate tons and tons of 1600 wall, just to use that generically. And I don't know if the stretch for them to go from fabricating 1600 wall and 451T to maybe making a simple operable vent to go into that storefront and curtain wall system, it's not a huge lift, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, about 20 years ago, I made a presentation to a company called Raynars. I happen to know the owners, and said, I think this is the opportunity. Come in, don't try and change the market totally, and don't try to dominate anything. Come in with a few products, make them user friendly for the guys who already have 20,000 square foot shops to fabricate. They know how to handle aluminum. They know how to fabricate it. They know how to put it together. They know their markets because they're doing projects and getting paid now, and see what you can come up with a solution for them for what they need. Back then, honestly, it was windows for schools because, and Mark's going to laugh when I say this, but every June, every year, there's a terrible scramble to get windows. And guess what kind of email you get from your window supplier? Oh, we're 30 weeks out right now. If you don't get your approved shops back in the next 20 minutes, you're losing your slot. You're going to the end of the line. I mean, that's every single year since I've been in this business. And that's the market. It's not New York high rise. It's a police station in Dubuque. It's a school in Chicago. That's really the market. It's, if anybody wants to come here and succeed, learn that market, because high rises, the market goes up, it goes down. It's very temperamental. We are not going to stop spending money on schools and institutions in this country, no matter what happens to the economy. In fact, if we do go into a recession, chances are we're spending more money on schools, not less money on schools. The only reason why schools and institutional work have been slow for the last 10 years is because the price of everything is so high. People who are smart don't want to pay $5 for something that should cost $3. So they've been putting all these capital projects on hold or pushing them out as far as they can. But I have a feeling in the next year that's going to turn the corner, and you're going to see a lot more schoolwork, what we call schoolwork, but it's really institutional work and government work.
Mark, so since you spent your predominant portion of your career as a manufacturer, what are some of the biggest things, lessons learned or surprises that you've taken away from pivoting over to the contracting side?
Well, I was in the contracting side for probably around 10 years in the early 2000s, but certainly it's a much more encompassing approach. In prefabricated wall system, it's not you're taking off windows and seeing how they anchor in the building and what the accessories are, but you're looking at a much broader picture because you're looking at the engineering to hang those panels on the wall. You're looking at water intrusion over the entire facade, and you're looking at every detail. So it's much more encompassing than just counting windows.
What about sort of from a contractual or risk standpoint?
Well, obviously you're taking on more risk because really, as a manufacturer, you try to limit your risk and have people send in takeoffs or at least send out scopes of work. Say we're limiting ourselves to this scope, and we exclude the general conditions and the supplemental conditions and all those things where all those landmines are buried. But when you're signing, as Eastern, when we're signing, a furnish and install contract for an exterior wall, we are encompassing all the contractual arrangements that my former customers would have assumed. So it's you have to be careful.
Right.
Do you think it's a different mindset?
Pardon?
Do you think it's a different mindset? And I'll say, which one do you think is more challenging?
Well, I think the prefabrication end is much more challenging. It's challenging for me because I'm morphing into that. But you're certainly taking on a lot more risk and liability.
You guys are essentially becoming the designer of record.
Well, everything we do, or all the successful projects that we've done, we don't bid a lot of public work. We work as a design assist partner because the key to prefabrication is to be able to work out all the details ahead of time so that we can go into fabrication and have panels on tractor trailers ready to ship to a job site as the steel is going up. So once the steel is up, we start to hang panels, and we have a dry gasket system. So once those panels lock into place, you're dried in. There's no exterior caulking after the fact. There's no caulking maintenance 5, 10, 20 years down the road. So it's an all-encompassing feat. But you have to have the right partners that want to buy in, and you can have a very successful project where you can accelerate the schedule. Consultants, architects love to come in and actually watch panels being built, but also to inspect the panels because they're on tables right in front of you, flat. You're not up on a swing, when it's 32 degrees out and the wind's whipping around, and to inspect it, but also to install the air vapor barrier and all the other components of the wall.
Mark, how much do you see of, from either a contractor or a manufacturer, a lot of upfront time spent working with the design team, getting something specified, getting something baked into the project, and then the project goes out to bid and the GC awards somebody who totally veered off the design intent. And the question is, does the design team have the opportunity to review that bid and rate, raise the red flag, or after the fact does it become a change order battle and them trying to convince the owner of what they did or did not ultimately get?
Well, we've all worked on projects for a long, long time and got everything specified and had somebody come in and undercut and lose the job, right? So all you can really do there is find the right people, find the right design people that are going to stand behind the specifications, provide budgets all along the way. At Eastern, when we're in the design assist process, if people want to make changes, we're right there because we have designers, engineers, and estimators in-house that, hey, okay, we can make this change and it's going to be X. Well, but there's another way to make that change where we can keep the budget. Those are the conversations that we have to have now. But on the Windows side in my past career, it's a matter of working out the details with the architect, and then following up everybody that's going to bid the job. I mean, it's a it's a little bit of a dance for sure.
Until you're contractually obliged to the team via design assist, and then they think, okay, we have our GMP values, but some guy's going to come in and tell the owner, you do this, this, or this, you could save 10%, 15% on your facade.
Well, talking about from the Eastern design assist approach, by the time we're done, we've basically designed the building for the owner. Working with the design team, we've helped them come up with the details that work from a constructability standpoint, from a performance standpoint, and from an aesthetic standpoint. And it's all within the budget, or they at least know what it's going to cost so they can make intelligent decisions. Whereas if you're in a design bid build situation, by the time you feel, you realize this job's over budget, then you really have a fight on your hands. Or the job doesn't get built.
What's the message that you send if you help them get to that final stage and stay within the budget, but a general contractor is incentivized to still either find ways to build it cheaper or put more money in their pocket? Like you said, is it just communicating the message across the project team?
Well, it is. Well, everybody, one of the key factors, and we have a presentation that talks about this, is that everybody's got to buy into the process. I mean, the enemy, if you will, is a schedule or some funky performance detail that we want this detail, but we have to make sure it performs. So you have to be a problem solver and you have to present some innovative solutions. And during that process, you're building your credibility. So at the end of the day, people are confident that you can perform, the job the way they want it performed. Are there anomalies? You might lose a job. Yeah, that happens. But in my mind, you're gonna secure over 90% of the work that you're gonna be doing a design assist on.
Are you still coming up against supply chain issues?
Occasionally. I'm not as involved with that on the prefabrication side as I heard the nightmares as we went through COVID on the Windows side.
Of course, there's supply chain issues. There will always be, but in terms of the bigger issue is suppliers, vendors, manufacturers maintaining adequate labor force and committing to the quality that they sold. And so there's varying factors at play here, COVID with inflation and delay shipment issues. But on the flip side, I think the outlook on sort of general employment has shifted, and finding means of attracting high quality tradespeople and factory workers has become more and more challenging.
Which is another case for prefabrication, because we've won a job. In fact, we're doing a job now where we weren't the least cost alternative, but they didn't have the labor force to erect the building and with the different trades, whereas we could provide a turnkey complete package.
All right, thank you both for coming on. Mark, what's the best way for people to engage with you if they do want to talk about prefabricated wall options?
I'm always available. Phone number 610-952-2415. I have it with me all the time. So
I'm not giving mine out as easily as you do, but thanks for both of you for joining.
Thanks.
Thanks, Adrian.